focus on chapters 9 and 10. And here, Suzanne is being asked to play the role of an art gallery tour guide, hosting a tour through a special new art exhibit on quantum consciousness. The main room has two paintings side by side. One painting is inspired by Professor Sapolsky's view of quantum consciousness as described in chapters 9 and 10. And the other is inspired by Nirvanic's view. That's Suzanne's company. She's a quantum physicist and also an artist and an engineer, an inventor, an entrepreneur who built a significant robotics company. And so in her view of quantum consciousness. So I asked her if she would take on this challenge. I can see that not only has she taken on the challenge, she's dressed the part. So she is dressed as the art tour guide. And then I also recently discovered that not only did she prepare her remarks for this, she actually painted the two paintings. So I think what you're going to see behind her are she's going to unveil the paintings, the Sapolsky painting and the Nirvanic painting, and then explain the difference of the two people's views of quantum consciousness. Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, welcome to our exhibit on quantum consciousness. I'm Artista, and I'm your gallery tour guide for today. Let me present to you the two paintings that I'll be describing. Both 18 by 24 inches, acrylic on canvas, professional gallery wrap style with archival varnish finish. Of course, we expect nothing less here. These works were created by one of our resident artists, who also happens to be a physicist. She's extremely into equations and science, you know the type. Usually, we don't let science nerds display their art in the gallery. They don't really have the creative flair we're looking for here, but these ones weren't too bad. We let them pass, barely. Anyway, both paintings share some things in common. The background here, with broad textured brushstrokes, represents classical physics, and the decorative gold lines depict quantum mechanics. As we know, quantum theory is a modification of our existing physics, so it's kind of an embellishment onto the backdrop. Gold is a little cliche by today's tastes, but I see what she was trying to do there. These circuits depict scientific tools and technologies that we've developed to measure and probe aspects of the background reality. The circuits meander towards the center of the painting. Perhaps a little too central, if you ask me. Has she never heard of rule of thirds? That aside, the squares in the middle, so the artist tells me, depict real data taken from a real science experiment performed in the area of quantum consciousness. Of course, I wouldn't know anything about that geekery, so let's move on. Now you can see there are some differences between the two paintings. In the one on the right, the areas encompassed by the gold quantum lines have some special aspects to their inner workings. The artist has incorporated iridescent, dichroic, and pearlescent effect paints to really create something highly analog. And this represents potentially hidden parts of quantum theory that we haven't yet been able to compress down into our black and white digital understanding of the world. Where is that collapse coming from? Is it really random? Or is there a hidden order in there, one that we've yet to make out of the randomness? This part I have to give some credit for. It's marginally original. Now, recently I read this book by Robert Sapolsky, a wonderful book that had previously convinced me that there was no free will, even when we include quantum mechanics in our theory of the world. But when I studied these paintings, it got me thinking, what if the quantum theory we understand today isn't quite complete? What if there is something going on, some hidden effects that maybe, just maybe, might subtly influence reality, and in turn, subtly influence our data? Maybe that means there could still be a loophole where our free will and our consciousness is hiding. Maybe the nerds just haven't quite found the final theory yet. And of course, how could I forget to mention the link between free will and consciousness, the very thing that wills? Again, powered by those hidden effects. Here, we see consciousness represented as usual, by an open eye. I feel the artist maybe could have been a little less literal here. So, in conclusion, I'll give these paintings an A for philosophical thought provokingness and a D for artistic merit. At the weekly gallery steering committee, I argued strongly for only including the painting on the right, because I thought the use of special effects to represent hidden variables of reality was novel and sort of saved the whole project, in my opinion. However, the gallery director preferred the painting on the left, and he was determined to overrule me. So in the end, we had no choice but to include both the paintings in the exhibition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Suzanne, maybe you could just begin with a description of the actual, we'll come to the ideas behind the painting, but just the process of creating the art.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, hi everyone. Suzanne here now. Yeah, so well, actually, I kind of like mock these up on the computer before I do them, usually to get all the aspects and everything right. And the actual, it's real data from the experiments I'm running. So these parts in the background are actually real plots that I included in the paintings.
Suzanne, are you able to just take the painting off the easel and put it
Yes.
closer to the camera?
So you can actually see the kind of like shiny effects here. So I just kind of mock up the design and get everything in the right place. And then I usually project and I do what's called a lithography step, which is actually tracing it with masking tape. And then I actually peel off the masking tape layers, which is an ode to how people actually used to create circuit boards in the old days. So it's like a technique I like doing. And then I kind of hand painted the rest on top with acrylic.
And Suzanne, can you just now go back to explain the essence of the difference between your view of quantum consciousness and what you read in Professor Sapolsky's chapters?
Yeah, so I loved the whole book. I thought it was awesome, and I actually really liked the chapter on quantum and whether quantum mechanics gets us out of the kind of free will conundrum. And Robert was arguing that it kind of it doesn't help to include quantum mechanics in the mix because a quantum collapse is essentially just a random selection. So there's really no room for free will in there either. But I guess where I challenge that view, with all respect, is that maybe there are things we don't yet understand about quantum theory because it is known to be an incomplete theory. So what I'm looking at is there something about this when this collapse happens in certain kinds of quantum systems that have feedback? Maybe it's not random anymore. Maybe it's actually diverges from random and there's more of a purposeful choice coming in there. So I'm sort of looking at that as a potential source for consciousness and agency in those systems.
And Suzanne, can you just share with the group here how you are attempting to empirically measure what you think might be a divergence from random?
Right. So we create these things called quantum conscious agents that run on the quantum computer. And we set them up, we send in some information, we allow that information to circulate around in the neural net, and then we allow that system to collapse the wave function and we look at which action it chooses. And then we do that a large number of times. So we do that, say, 100,000 times and gather statistics of which state the system ended up in. And then we do the same thing in a simulation of the quantum computer. And what we're looking for is there any preference that the quantum computer chooses on average over that large number of statistics? Is that distribution different in the simulation and in the quantum system? And if it is, then there could be a new part of quantum theory where choice and agency can come in that we haven't seen yet because we've only been looking at very small quantum systems that do match the theory perfectly.
And Suzanne, the reason that you are hunting here is not just to find a loophole in Professor Sapolsky's chapter 9. It's because you think that there could be quantum behavior in biology in human brains.
Yeah, so it's a hypothesis I'm just interested in testing. People have been going on and on about these potential theories of quantum consciousness for so long, and there aren't many very well-designed experiments to actually test for it. So whether it's true or not, I'm trying to be scientific about this, but I think we need to find ways of actually testing, is quantum mechanics, when it's amplified up to a large macroscopic state, and that state has a lot of information going into it, is it actually doing something different than what we'd expect from classical physics? So yeah, an example could be a biological cell, could be having some kind of macroscopic quantum state inside it that's actually collapsing as part of its action selection system. And if that's the case, then you could make quite a good argument for quantum biology going from like the small scale up to something like a cell, and then even a brain eventually.
And Suzanne, my understanding is that the reason that nobody has done these experiments before is because we have just reached a capability in the actual quantum computing world, the hardware, and even the experiments you're running now, you're worried that the machines may still be a bit too primitive. But can you
Mm-hmm.
just describe, like, how do we think about the threshold of being able to do these experiments today relative to not being able to do them, not that long ago?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you ask anyone who's interested in quantum biology and quantum consciousness, they typically say even a neuron may have like thousands and thousands of proposed qubits inside it. So even a single neuron has a large number of qubits, then we can't really even imagine calculating or simulating something like this with the kind of quantum computers we've had up until now. So now we're getting into the regime where, depending on the kind of quantum computer you can have 100 to thousands of qubits. So I think that now quantum computers are getting to the stage where we can actually use them as simulators of some of these theoretical models. So before, we really haven't had that capability.
Let me invite Professor Sapolsky into this if he has anything he'd like to, either questions to ask or comments to make on this that he brought up in these two chapters.
Well, first, apologies for having to jump up for a couple of minutes there. I am so pleased and relieved to hear anything nice said about Chapter 9 by someone who actually understands quantum mechanics and quantum computing, because I cannot begin to express the extent to which I was winging it there on thin ice. It strikes me that what we have is the problem of how to integrate the very reductive low level quantum events with chocolate over strawberry, with the large emergent level that makes us us. And it's quite possible that quantum events may turn out to be non-random. The fear that they're just random, and that I take it as sort of the simplest prediction from there, is one that leads you to sort of the snarky conclusion of, if your moral compass is made out of random sort of events occurring at the subatomic level, that's a pretty questionable moral compass you have there. So if there's instead the emerging possibility that quantum systems can come up with something other than statistically random and begin to show something resembling choice, decision, whatever, what that then gives us is resorting to a filtering model. If that's the case, quantum hiccups down below are generating all sorts of thoughts, all sorts of propositions, all sorts of wishes. And what people like Daniel Dennett emphasized in what I thought was a singularly unconvincing argument for free will, but what he would picture is, we have a conscious top-down filter on top saying, this one is gibberish, this one is gibberish, this one not okay, let's go with this one. And that's a plausible way by which you could then filter out all the things a quantum system is coming up with, whether random or in fact skewed in a particular direction. The problem, though, is exactly what I brought up before. How did you become the sort of person who would have those filtering criteria, who would have those values, who would have those proclivities and preferences and such? It's the same exact issue of that, potential theoretical filter there is one filled with the values that have made you you, and you had no control over that because I think, sort of as emphasized initially by Nicole, all we are is the sum of the biology over which we had no control and its interactions with environment over which we had no control. And not only will that give us a taste for what type of ice cream, it will give us the value system, the moral compass of whatever filtering we impose on this quantum system, if it did turn out to work that way.
Suzanne, just before we move on from this, I give you an opportunity to respond if there's anything you want to say. But I would ask you to do one other thing, which is prof- give your 60-second pitch to Professor Sapolsky of what's the minimum evidence that you could generate that would convince him to reconsider his central thesis. Okay, in other words, is there anything that you think you're doing where you think, okay, if I were to present him with this empirical data, would that be enough to change his view um, on his central argument regarding free will?
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of a big question. Um,
The biggest.
the
This is the biggest of
just
questions.
just for some context, the theory, the assumptions I'm working under is that there is kind of like there is a built-in blueprint in the universe. It's like a teleological argument where there's actually some value system or some platonic system, or David Bohm called it implicate order, that's sort of built into the universe that steers the values of everything, all matter, all organisms, all life. So if you buy that, if there is some kind of blueprint, then the evidence I would show is that there are certain preferences that systems end up in when they quantum systems when they get large enough that they don't demonstrate when they're smaller, and that they also build up and learn over time. Because I think that they are trying to choose states that put them into what you might think of as a state they want to be in, like a happy state or a pleasant qualia state. And I think that is kind of judged and decided by this platonic influence that we don't really understand yet, that's coming in through quantum mechanics. So the evidence I'd show is, when I've gathered enough statistical distribution, I would say, here's the distribution that comes from classical, the theory as we know it today, quantum theory, which predicts this. Here is a distribution that's different than that, and this is the one we actually see in reality. And then I would show that, like, quantum physics as we know it predicts one distribution, we're seeing another distribution. And I would also show evidence of how we'd gone through every single variable very, very rigorously and shown that it's not just some noise, it's not just some bias, it can't be explained by anything else. And then I would say, let's dig deeper into that if you're interested in it.
And why, Suzanne, how would you make the argument that difference in distributions should be interpreted as a rebuttal of his central
Right. So
argument?
that's a more difficult question, because I'm not sure it actually argues for free will. I think that it argues for a more universal knowledge system that is deciding on our behalf. So in a way, this is actually it feels like we have free will, but maybe we're just choosing according to some deeper blueprint that we're not aware of. And I think that so the illusion of free will comes from the fact we don't understand where that kind of like basic drive is coming from. We haven't discovered it yet. Maybe if we do discover more about it, we would actually now see that as one of another one of Robert's arguments for ticking off
Oh, wait
and
a minute.
saying it's not it's not really free. It's
If
just the
you end up
universe.
if you end up generating evidence on your thesis, this is not going to overturn his book. It's just going to give him one more chapter to add to it.
I think maybe, although it's kind of paradoxical that it still feels like we have free will, even though it might be being decided for us by some like deeper quantum theory.
Professor Sapolsky, if you have anything you'd like to add, please do. Otherwise, we'll go on to the next role play.
Well, I think, just to use a word, I guess, translated from German to cite Einstein, that would be spooky as hell. if a quantum system were beginning to generate that. And that would be totally amazing. And it would be amazing that you even refer to the sort of quantum mechanics that for a century has been completely mysterious, calling it boring old classical quantum mechanics. There's still the filtering problem. It's a way you could even have a quantum system that winds up with a completely bizarre proclivity for pistachio ice cream, but there's still the issue of filtering the options up above.